Oh, there's been a really common statistic being shared right now where it's like only 2 to 5% of adults over the age of 30 sprint and will likely never sprint ever again in their life. Training like with weights, even in older adults, has become very popular because we know that extends the quality of life and the years of free independent living that an older person is able to do. And sprinting, I believe it starts there. When you're 20s and you're 25, 30 years old, if you can still sprint and keep sprinting and keep being an athlete till late into your 40s, your 50s, even into your 60s, you're going to extend your lifespan of high quality years that you have available on this planet. What's great about a hill is similar to what's great about box jumps for someone who's interested in jumping, is that when I jump up onto something, I'm effectively bringing the ground to me. So the most stressful part of a jump is not taking off, it's landing. And most people will tell you that if they have achy or sensitive knees, it's pretty easy to jump up and produce force. It's kind of hard to accept it. Like, you're gonna be a lot more hesitant to jump off of a ledge and land than you are to jump up onto something because you feel like you're very much in control of it. It's the same thing on a hill. If I'm interested in sprinting, it's gonna be much easier to start running up a hill because the ground is always coming to you. You can tolerate far more yards or meters of running up a hill than you could on flat ground because the impact is so much less because the ground is always meeting you in the air versus you having to fall back down to the ground. And two, if I have achy knees, usually slowing down, most people, especially coming back from things like ACL, meniscus surgery, patellar tendinopathy, the phrase we use is you've got a gas pedal, but you got no brakes. It's hard to drive a Ferrari without brakes. So that's typically where the hill comes in, where I want to be able to produce, but I have problems decelerating, I have problems slowing down my braking system. Well, the hill takes care of the brakes for you now because all I have to do is stop pushing as hard and the hill will automatically slow me down. If I have a hill, ideally that hill is more than maybe 10 meters long. If it's not, that's still great. But for a time, I would think I just need to spend maybe 10 to 15 minutes here. It doesn't need to be an all-day thing, especially if you're using it for warming up. If you're using it for speed training, sure, maybe you're on it a little longer. But the idea with all of the warm-ups is like, okay, what does 50% effort feel like? That's challenging for people who aren't well trained, who aren't used to training. But if you know what 100% feels like, max all that effort, I'm just gonna go about half that. For someone that's just starting, if I had somebody who had never sprinted before, I'm gonna say, hey, just give me 70 to 80%. Let's focus on great positions before we focus on straining and getting down. Almost everybody that wants to be fast will tighten their fists, tighten their face, tighten the neck, and their shoulders come up, and you see their stride pattern very different from rep to rep because they're trying to like find it. They're trying to figure out how can I get faster, and if I feel like I'm more aggressive, it feels like I'm faster. If you time them, they'll progressively get slower the more that they strain and tighten up. We just rolled up, no warm-ups, no special stretching, just started running a hill, and I can already run pretty hard. Now we're gonna get into some build-ups. So we'll start with something like 30 yards or 30 meters. We're maybe only going at 60 to 70% intensity. Then I'll drop it down to 20 to 25, and we'll bump that intensity up by 5 to 10%, and so on and so forth till we're down to 10 yards, and I'm going at about 90% effort through 10. If you're thinking about a million different things, foot placement, arm placement, hands, head, neck, torso, like it gets so overwhelming because everything is going to happen so fast that it's over before you know it, and you're not even really sure if you did it right. So instead of focusing on a million small things, we try to focus on big general ideas, overarching principles and concepts that you're trying to think about as you sprint, so that way your mind doesn't get so distracted of thinking about a million things. And we don't have to talk about specifically where you need your foot. Typically, people will find a spot that feels most comfortable for them, especially when you're just starting to sprint. But if I hinge forward and I get this angle, something you're trying to do is pin the torso, meaning that from my waist up, as I project out, I'm not trying to rise up, and I'm also not trying to pull myself down as you're going, because you get this round and this neck posture down here. So it's more that find a posture that's, you know, relatively what you can handle, usually around that like 40-degree posture, maybe a little steeper for faster athletes. And then when you push out, I'm just trying to maintain the upper half posture for those first few hits. Just pin the torso. The other thing is, out of the gate, we're looking for big shapes. That's another thing we talk about, whether that's big shapes with your arm swing, whether that's big shapes with your legs. Most people, when they come out, they're in such a hurry to get going that they'll want to just put down and pick up like they're doing a speed ladder. Instead, your goal is to project with each step. If I just think about making big postures, big shapes, and exaggerating some of those first big steps, pin the torso, big shape. Okay, that's all it takes. I'm just making big shapes. And as long as you're making big shapes, then over time, as you practice, you can make those big shapes happen faster. So I've got pin the torso, waist up. I'm just trying to keep that same trajectory. I've got big shapes. And then the last thing is rhythm. I'm trying to basically build my rhythm with each step. It doesn't need to be a very hot rhythm right out of the gate. It's more of a crescendo in music we were talking about, where there's a build. Those first few steps, I may spend longer on the time. I may be covering bigger ranges of motion. It takes me a little bit longer to overcome inertia to get started. So I'm just looking to push, to project my body out. And then as I start to rise, that rhythm will increase. Running with resistance has probably become a little bit more popular recently. And it's not that running with resistance is necessarily going to make you faster, because ultimately the resistance is slowing you down. The purpose of using resistance is that it holds me in a very specific posture, because the moment I start to rise too much, the weight starts winning and pulling me back. And it becomes harder to propel myself downfield unless I'm maintaining that forward lean posture. So you may use something that would keep you at somewhere between 80%, maybe all the way down to 10 or 20% of a speed decrement, meaning that if I were to time this run, I would be at 80% of what I could run. Or maybe I'm at 30% or 20% of my best time that I could run. And that may undulate, that may change throughout a program or over the course of a season. I may start heavier to slow me down intentionally, where I have to stay in deeper angles, and I may only be going 5 to 10 yards because it's so heavy. And then I take this off and I practice my starts at those same distances, 5, 10, maybe out to 15 yards, just trying to maintain those same positions and those same slicing attack angles. Today we're using only a 45-pound plate. This allows me to get a little faster. So this may only be about a 30% speed decrement. At your gym, if you're working with limited space and you only have a push sled, the benefit of a push sled is that, again, your goal with using a sled is not to make you faster. It's to attain positions, to attain postures, specific angles, and specific strength for sprinting. So if I have my hands here or here, like one of those shopping cart type sleds, the goal is to still be projecting forward with each step, creating a straight line from my head to my heel, similar to that angle that I'm trying to get to when I'm accelerating out. It may be steeper, and that's what the weight is for, is so that I can maintain a very steep angle, finishing that hip position each stride. So even if you only have a push sled and that push sled is not going to be getting very fast, or you're worried about slowing it down because maybe you only have 10 or 15 yards to work with in a commercial gym, that's still okay to use as part of your training for sprinting. It may be better to use that during your weight training session versus just before or just after a sprint session. Even though it could be used there, it may be more effective to treat it as an auxiliary or part of your weight training specific for sprinting. Most people, their injuries happen from doing too much too soon with too little time to recover. It's that simple. It's about load management. And oftentimes when we're hurt or trying to come back or trying to improve, we get so impatient thinking that I need to get these gains now. And it's not about the now, it's about the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day. I typically tell people that it would be better to be a mile short than an inch over in training. And that's true all the time, that if I'm choosing weights, if I'm choosing intensities, I'm choosing volumes that I know I can comfortably tolerate and recover from, I'm going to yield a far better success rate down the long run versus trying to strain for the most I can do in a single day and doing it all at once. You can't. And it's just a matter of finding, how can I win today? How can I just find whatever marginal improvement from last week to this week, or yesterday to today? And as long as you stay focused on that present moment, like, good things are inevitably going to happen for you, and your mood's probably gonna be way better too, because you're not so enamored and like worried about this arbitrary goal that you've set way out in the distance of this ideal self that may never come to fruition. Like, you can be ideal today, you know?